National Young Writers Month. I'm Fiona Dunn, the creative producer at Express Media, and with us today is Voiceworks Editor Elizabeth Flux for Stet, Editing for the Editors. Elizabeth Flux is an editor and freelance writer who has been published in Kill Your Darlings, Film Inc., Junkie, and Spook magazine. In 2011, she edited Adelaide University's student publication On D and has been an editor for Express Media's programs The Signal Express and Buzzcuts. When we begin tonight, you can join the conversation and ask questions by tweeting using the National Young Writers Month hashtag NYWM15. Now, Liz, over to you.
Hello, and welcome to me talking to me and not knowing what your reaction is. I'm going to assume that you're laughing at my jokes and listening to what I'm saying, but yes, it's going to be a good night. All right, so tonight my topic is editing for the editors, which as a subject matter is kind of like the Book of Monsters or the Invisible Book of Invisibility, because Harry Potter jokes are going to happen, so just deal with that. So what we'll be covering tonight is what it means to me to be an editor, practical things that will stop you from sitting under your desk crying, and strategies for working with writers and other editors. So the description of this included punctuation and grammar discussion, but my focus is more going to be on the running of things and on interactions rather than how to proofread or how we do things with a red pen. However, a promise is a promise. So to meet my obligations or our KPIs, here is a grammar joke. So the past, the present, and the future all walk into a bar. It was tense. All right, now that I've paused for your uproarious laughter, I'm going to continue. So first things first, things to remember about an editor. You are here to shape the publication as a whole, and as a result, this means that it's not necessarily going to be the top 10 pieces that get in. Like ideally, when you're a writer, you imagine that if your piece is the best one, then it will get in. However, publication is about more than just the top 10 pieces. It's about pieces that work together and that complement each other. You can't have 3 pieces about fishing with dad, or you can't have 2 pieces that talk about animals, and you have to think about the balance all the time. So part of that is thinking about how the publication is going to look overall and how that works with pieces individually. Your role is also to help guide a writer and to help them produce their best work, which means you need to help respect their voice, and with that, you need to understand that it might be different from yours. Writers are allowed and encouraged to disagree with you. It's a partnership. It's not a student-teacher relationship. You're not telling them to do one thing. They're not telling you another thing. You're working together. It's a conversation, not a dictation. All right. So boring everyday stuff that will stop you crying under your desk. This is stuff that I learned the hard way. I've never actually sat under my desk crying, but I have been to the point, particularly during my student media days, where it's 3 in the morning, you haven't planned your time well, and all of a sudden it's a great idea for you and your co-editor just to decide, now is the moment to see if we all fit under this desk. And then one of you will inevitably get trapped, and then the other 2 will have to lift the desk off you, and you'll still have to meet your print deadlines, and you'll have wasted 20 minutes being trapped under a desk. So that is a hypothetical situation, of course, and that definitely did not happen to me. All right, so organization. Google Calendars are your best friend. You should try and map things out well in advance, a year in advance if you can. Get all your deadlines in there. If you have a print publication, you should negotiate your deadlines with your printer and put those in there as soon as you can. Make sure that everyone who's involved in different parts of the cycle know when they need to be involved, so that you don't get any nasty surprises when you're handing things over to a designer and they're like, oh, I thought this was a week later. Or if you're expecting people to edit things and then they're overseas, you need to have everyone in the loop at all times. And make sure they know how they can plan their time, because it's not just about you planning your time, it's you allowing other people to plan their time around the schedule. You also need to set hours for yourself. Even if your inbox is calling, you don't have to answer if it's outside the hours that you've set for yourself. It's important to have a good work-life divide. It's easy to not switch off your devices and things and to sort of throw yourself in there all the time. But if you do that, you won't end up producing your best work. And while you might feel that being present always is the best way to be a good editor, that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes you need to listen to yourself and go, I'm not understanding words anymore, or I'm misspelling my own name, so perhaps I should not be sending something to print right now. So that's where organization and having a good divide comes together. So you always give yourself a buffer of time to make things work out, and so that you have space to allow yourself to get sick or to sleep, or maybe eat food as a novelty. That's a thing that can happen sometimes. Another thing, depending on what kind of publication you're working on, it's a good idea to have your work email be separate from your personal email. So I've done that in the past where I've been working on a short-term publication and I've just made a folder with my normal email, but then you get things all mixed up and you don't know when things are coming in, when it's a personal matter, when it's a work matter, and then it all gets confused and everything is terrible and no one hears from you, and then it's all your fault and everything implodes and the publication dies. And that didn't happen, but yeah, keep things separate and keep them organized. So moving on to strategies with working with writers and other editors, the main point that I've had is that you need to work in a partnership and you need to think about the way to best get your message across to someone. So this will depend on your relationship with them, and like, we're all individuals, we'll all take things different ways. Like, I respond best to editing that goes, this is not good enough, do better. But that's not for everyone, and I would never say that to someone else. That's just what I know I can handle, and editors who've worked with me before know that that's how I work. But if you're gonna go in cold, if you haven't worked with someone before, if you know nothing about them and this is your first interaction, it's best to be conservative. Start gentle and then gauge what your relationship is as you talk more, and then see what they respond to and what works. This is something you'll figure out. It's like a friendship. You learn how to talk to one another, but to start off with, be conservative, because you've got a responsibility to writers. If you're working with a first-time writer, if you hit the tone wrong, they may never send something in again. There is a big responsibility with being an editor, and you need to think about that when you're talking to people as well. So I'm going to go through it step by step. First up, always reply. Never leave someone with silence. If you're a writer slash editor as well, you know what it's like to send something off and be waiting and waiting and waiting and not knowing if it's been received, if you send it to the wrong person, frantically checking your sent box, maybe creepily going on to Twitter to try and find out if they've gotten submissions yet or if yours has gotten lost. I've been on that side of it, and it's important to remember what writers are feeling. So even if it's just a simple thing saying, hey, we've received your submission, we'll get back to you in the next few weeks. A generic one to everyone is a good way to go, because people just want to know that their work has been received. Yep. So as I said before, with new writers, you need to be cautious, because what you say to them could impact on whether they send something in again to you or to anyone else. And it's a big responsibility. When you start editing with someone, lay out that it's a conversation from the beginning, because it's hard to know what the dynamic is if you've never been edited before. So if you say, this is a back and forth between you and me, we'll be talking about your work and how best to shape it. But everything I say is not prescriptive necessarily. Then you go from there. Yeah, so, sorry, I lost my place. Lay out that it's a conversation, that you are there to help shape their work and you're not there to rewrite their work. Whenever you make a change, try and mark it in track changes, which is like the obvious thing, but always leave it in there so you can see where it is. Don't just change their work and don't let them know. You have to explain why you're making a change. So even if you add in a comma, it's just to say you want to have a pause here. If you feel that something needs to be built upon, explain why. If you just say, I feel like it needs a better segue here because then we'll understand more of their character, that kind of thing. Explain your reasoning so then they have a chance to rebut it or take it on board and not just see you as changing their work for no reason. So again, you need to respect voice. You should, in my opinion, never edit voice out of a piece. If the voice of a piece is wrong for your publication, then it's better to not run it at all than to try and strip the voice away from a piece, because that's what a writer has. They have their way that they write, the way that they express themselves. And while you can change language around, while you can suggest, like for a fiction piece, that plot changes, changing the way that they speak and the tone that they hit is not right to do to a piece, because you may as well write it yourself in that case. And finally, on that point, never run something that you've edited without checking the writer is happy with the changes first. That's something that's happened in the past in student media, and it's sometimes a surprise, but yeah, so writers need to know what changes are happening so they can approve them or not approve them, because ultimately it's their work you're shaping and not your work that you're having them write for you. So during the editing process, it's important to set deadlines at every stage. So if you set deadlines and get them to agree to them, each edit, just give them a reasonable amount of time, and also make it so that you're asking them, not saying it has to be in by this date. So they have a chance to say, oh no, I've got something. Then they can negotiate a new one. It's also important to, well, straight up lie to people about when you need things. You need to give yourself a buffer for things to go wrong. If people don't get things in, if people just stop communicating with you, like just straight up don't write back to you at all, you need to have a contingency plan for that. So I always give myself a week, or depending on if I know the writer, how long you'd need to fix something going wrong. If they pull a piece, if the piece doesn't come together, you need to have space to breathe. Otherwise, you'll at last minute sort of be sitting on your desk crying, writing a piece under a pseudonym, and wondering why you didn't have a Google Calendar, like I suggested. So, yeah, I'm just going to during the editing process, so takeaway messages, set deadlines, and make sure each edit is numbered chronologically so you can keep track, because otherwise it'd be the worst if you had edited 3 versions of it, then you went back to number 1 and sent changes through, and you're like, I thought I changed this, and then you waste everyone's time, including theirs. So that is bad. So for making comments, my rule of thumb is to use emotive language for positive comments. So if there's something you liked, say that. Don't just put negative things or things to change. You have to do a bit of both. And use non-emotive language for more critical points. It's important to separate the writing from the writer in that case, because as a writer, it's easy to feel like you are being criticized, whereas if the focus is on the piece and why the piece would improve from this change, then it's a lot easier to take that on board. Whereas if you're like, I think you should change this because the character is bad, that's a criticism of you rather than the piece of writing. So that comes back into having your message delivered in the way that it's most likely going to be heard. So make it about the work and not about the writer. And again, always explain why you're doing something. So sometimes you'll find yourself working with multiple editors. Like I've worked with both. Sometimes it's been just me, like it is at Voiceworks. Other times it's been 3 of us. When I did student media, I worked with 2 guys called Sam and Rory, who may or may not be the ones who were in the hypothetical situation where we got trapped under our desks. The key point for that is to always communicate, because if you don't communicate, you'll end up, each of you, doing work that the other person has already done, and that's redundant and a waste of everyone's time. And on the flip side, sometimes you'll think someone else is doing something and no one's doing it, and everything is ruined forever, and it's everyone's fault because they didn't communicate. So find a way that is best for doing that, whether that's having a Google Doc, a Facebook thread, email thread, and I don't know, carrier pigeons, Morse code, whatever works for all of you, as long as you figure it out and discuss it together beforehand. It's also good to divide up tasks and have a clear division of labor. So if there's someone whose job it is to respond to emails on a certain day, if someone's going to proofread, if someone's going to commission work, it depends on the type of publication you have again, but it's important to sit down and have a chat as a group to make sure that all the bases are being covered, there's no redundancy, and that also everyone knows what they're doing. So it's also important to work to the skills that you have, but it's also important to learn. So try and challenge yourself by learning something new at each step of the way. So don't just proofread if you're excellent at proofreading. Try and find something that you're not so great at and do that as well, as long as it's not to the detriment of the publication. So, and working in group, as always, be considerate. Try and think about what other people need and help out where you can as well. So that's my advice for editing. Of course, I got some random miscellaneous advice, so this is going to be a bit out of order, a bit random. When you spell check names, go to the original emails. Like along the line, things get messed up. It's like a game of whispers where things get changed along the way. You don't know what the name is. Justin can turn it into Justine, or you can go from Elizabeth to Rosemary, as happened to me once, and you don't know how that happens. So go back to the original email, see what the spelling is. Do this in plenty of time so that you can email the writer if need be. Another thing is sometimes you end up, because you've entered into a conversation with them and you've gotten to know them, you end up with a nickname on one page and their full name on the contents page, and it doesn't match up, and that's all very awkward, and everyone's just sort of confused about who these people are. Or they're not, it's just if you're pedantic, then it will bother you, and so check these things in advance. Poems. InDesign loves removing indentation from poems. And it's important to, again, go back to the original submission or the final edit and have a look at that against what you've got in your final print version to make sure that things haven't moved around, because indents mean things, placement means things, space line alignment means things, and having this out of whack can make a big impact on the way a poem is read. Another thing is, if you are at any stage in the editing process or in just the reading process, if something makes you feel uncomfortable and you can't put your finger on what it is, you should always go with it, because gut instinct has a way of being right when it comes to this, because sometimes things are a red flag. And if you ever feel uncomfortable about something, you should flag it with someone else, ask them what they think, and see if you need to take it further, whether it's a writer needs help or if a piece might be a legal issue. If it's coming up as a question, then you should always go with it, ask the question. If you have to ask yourself, you should ask someone else as well. And my final bit of random advice is to take risks on writers. No one is perfect when they first start out. So it's important to work with people who might not send you the best pitch or the best polished piece of writing first up. It's important to build all those relationships and to help people out through working with them. So to wrap up, my take-home messages are that you need to look at the bigger picture all of the time. Like, you need to put the publication together in a way that makes sense. So you're not just looking at individual pieces of writing, or if this one is the best versus this one's the best. If they're on the same subject matter and you're putting it in a publication, they might not work well together. So you need to look at the big picture for that. And also always remember your relationship with the writer. It's a collaboration and it needs mutual respect. You are shaping their work and not rewriting it. So that's all the stuff that I prepared. If there's questions, I'm happy to answer them. But
that was absolutely wonderful advice. I don't think we have any questions just yet, but if you do have questions for Liz, you can get in touch with her on Twitter at Elizabeth Flux, ELIZABETH FLUX. She's also excellent for jokes and pun games, so make sure you follow her anyway, even if you don't have questions. Thank you so much for tuning in for this National Young Writers Month event, and a big thank you to Liz for taking the time tonight to give us all of that wonderful advice. As I said, follow her on Twitter, check out her blog, pick up a copy of Voiceworks because it's an amazing publication. So Express Media's National Young Writers Month is occurring throughout the month of June, but tomorrow is our very final event, being hosted by the co-directors of National Young Writers Festival, called How to Festival as a Young Writer. In the meantime, until then, catch up on all the National Young Writers Month event stuff on the blog. If you missed the beginning of this broadcast, you can catch up on the YouTube channel now. That will be being uploaded simultaneously as I'm talking. So go and catch up on all of the other events as well. They've been absolutely fantastic. Jump onto Twitter and check out the National Young Writers Month hashtag at NYWM15. And like I said, if you do have any editorial questions for Liz, get her on Twitter, send her an email. I'm sure she'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much, and we'll see you tomorrow.